Hi, this is Eternal King here bringing you another LOR video today. So I was watching Sunny's video on the Go Big counter for Standard. Again, go check out his video if you are struggling in Standard to deal with Eddy. I highly recommend that you give his deck a try because, again, your card selection in Standard is very limited when it comes to counters. So using his, sort of bilge water, um, uh, big 5 mana ping spell effect is going to be very, very good as far as the standard power curve is concerned. So something like double up, right? So like double up is actually standard legal, and it is probably one of the few big burn to face cards that are still standard legal. But that inspired me to think about like what cards could Riot rotate into standard in 2 months, because again, every 2 months is going to be a new standard season, and there'll be cards rotated to keep the meta fresh. It really got me thinking, like, what cards could they rotate in from Eternal that I take for granted that would really help the standard players who are suffering right now in the Go Big meta that is standard. So I wanted to show off some cards that I think that if they were rotated in, they would just instantly equalize the playing field with Eddy in a competitive sense. So the first one, and again, you might say that this is a terrible idea to bring it back. You might hate the card, but it is Decimate, right? So old school 6 mana, unconditional, deal 4 to the enemy nexus. Again, we just showed off the Bilgewater equivalent, which is the 5 mana ping card, which can be reacted to and countered. Decimate is much harder to react to because it is unconditional 4 burn to Nexus. If this card were to be rotated back into Standard, aggro would be revitalized, and then that would help to equalize the Eddy, the Eddy meta, the Go Big meta that is essentially Standard, what Standard has devolved into. So basically what we're seeing is that Eddy was such a powerful card, and I've never argued that it's not a powerful card. What I've argued is that it is powerful much like a lot of other things are powerful, and that there are cards that help to equalize the playing field in the extended card pool that make Eddy less of a concern. So by bringing in some of these legacy cards back into this, by rotating them back into Standard, you will effectively help to neuter Eddy in Standard, much like he is neutered in Eternal. Decimate is one of those cards. Eddy decks never run much healing, so Decimate, just unconditional 4 burn to face, Nexus is very, very good. What are some constructions for a Noxus aggro deck? Well, you can run Noxus P and Z as a burn list. You can run, probably not Noxus Shadow Isles, but there's a lot of burn in Shadow Isles. Sometimes the right answer is P and Z Shadow Isles. And again, there's a lot of Shadow Burn that was rotated out of the game as well, which were very important equalizing cards, old school cards that are very powerful. Stuff like Phantom Prankster. When another ally dies, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. So again, this is not standard legal. It is a core package card, meaning that it was basically released day 1 of LOR. And it is a core package card that essentially allows you to interact with the opponent's nexus in an indirect fashion. Essentially killing your own creatures or simply swinging with your creatures, forcing the opponent to take blocks and pushing damage to Nexus anyway. So this is a core package card, much like Decimate, that would help to equalize the playing field. Good old Swim was known for playing Phantom Prankster into... it was just like one of his like OG favorite combo decks, was like Phantom Prankster into any sort of ephemeral generation. And then having that be the same thing as Burn, right? So you can play Onslaught of Shadows with a Prankster on board, and all of a sudden Onslaught of Shadows is now a Mystic Shot. But it's slightly better than a Mystic Shot because, again, you get to pick blocks a lot of the time. So stuff like that, just bringing Phantom Prankster back into the game, all of a sudden, and again, you might have to bring back... No, the ephemeral packages in the game. So you can play Haunted Relic and unleash 3 spirits, but there's no way to cash in on the card, which is why you will never, this is not good for Standard as is. But if you were able to rotate Phantom Prankster back into the game and play Haunted Relic, well, now that's just to get excited to face, right? And it's a little better than get excited to face because you all of a sudden get to pick blockers as well. So again, that's another card that could be rotated back in. That is old school LOR. Like Decimate was a vanilla card. Phantom Prankster was a vanilla card. These are essential balancing cards for LOR as a card game, and it's one of the reasons why I never played Standard, because the idea of losing some of these core package cards from rotation just seemed dumb to me. It just seemed like, well, if you start getting rid of all these ways of interacting with the opponent's Nexus, the biggest deck will always be the best deck, and that's exactly what we're seeing in Standard right now, minus, you know, some of these creative solutions that Sunny has to come up with to essentially do the exact same thing that I'm saying, but like less efficiently. Which again, even less efficient Nexus interaction is better than no Nexus interaction in the Standard format. Other things, you know, again, Ballistic Bot is Standard legal. That's nice. So again, they actually just rotated this back in recently. So like, I think the LOR devs are kind of getting that, like, you need a little bit of Nexus interaction to keep the game balanced. You need it in the game. Otherwise, it's just the biggest deck wins, which is not fun for most people, I think. I want to say that I'm hearing a lot of frustration in the comments that, like, oh, these Eddy decks are so powerful. How can you say they're not powerful? Well, of course they feel powerful when you rotate out all the counters. You know what I mean? Like, if none of the counters exist in the format, of course it's going to feel powerful. But the counters do exist in Eternal. They very much do so. Other cards that I think could be rotated back in to instantly counter Eddy. In Ionia, it would be Aurelia, right? So you rotate back in Aurelia. Aurelia just like instantly eats Eddy, right? Now, of course, Aurelia is actually kind of a hard deck to pilot optimally compared to a lot of other lists, because she only gets like max value when you're attacking like 3 times in a single turn, which means like things like optimal mana usage, planning ahead for future turns, capitalizing on, you know, those sort of big combos when they're available. So it's actually kind of hard to pilot this deck optimally. But that would be another solution, is like, okay, rally based token decks or just rally mechanics are going to do well into go big decks. Attacking 3 times in a turn because you play Flawless Duet, and then Flawless Duet summons, you know, 2 blades, and then because you're also playing Azir, it also summons 2 Sand Soldiers, and then you do that 2 more times, or you do it 1 more time in a single turn with another Blade Dance effect, and then you swing, and then all of a sudden you've attacked 3 times. And even for the Eddy deck, even though their stuff is big, you're making them take those difficult blocks multiple times in a single turn, so even their big things will be smaller things by the time you swing. And that is the optimal way to play Azir Aurelia. You never open swing. You rally twice first, and then you swing. Other things that could be rotated in that would help deal with Eddy. Buried Nice. Is Buried Nice even Standard legal anymore? Let's see. Nope. Okay, so Buried Nice will be the other card. So if you want to talk about like high-end ramp solutions for dealing with Eddy, it would be Buried Nice. So Buried Nice is a card that says 9 mana, obliterate each enemy to summon a Frozen Throne in their place, and then you play an 8 mana card that essentially deletes all your opponent's board. So again, Buried Nice is a little slow, but if you basically one-sided board wipe the opponent with a Buried Nice, that's going to be pretty devastating for the Eddy player. It's going to be kind of hard for them to come back from that. If you just like hard ramp into a Buried Nice, hit that stairs, and just one-sided board wipe them after they played all their tempo followers and big stuff, because that's what Standard players do. If you just do that, then that's going to be hard for them to recover from. So that's another counter. So like one-sided AoEs. We have burn and Nexus interaction. We have rally-based mechanics, where you attack multiple times in a turn, and then you have things like one-sided board wipes. Any of these things could be rotated back into Standard, and I would help to greatly diminish the win rate of Eddy decks, essentially just being the face of Standard. They're not the face of Eternal, they are the face of Standard. Trying to think, other nice things. I'm thinking of, yeah, I'm thinking of Grappler here. So Grappler's a big singular will guy. Singular will, pick an ally, recall all other units and landmarks. So if you're a big fan of Grappler, Grappler is having a terrible time in Standard right now because a lot of his favorite Ionia cards were rotated out, which, like, this is why I stopped playing Standard Rotation 1, is because all my favorite cards were rotated out. So, of course, Grappler's going to play League of Legends until the next rotation happens, because there's nothing for him in Standard right now. Coming to Eternal. Eternal's great, buddy. Singular will. Pick an ally, recall all their units and landmarks. So the Eddy player plays their tempo followers, they play Shyvana, their mid-range follower, they play their big 6 drops, and then you just singular will nothing, and it recalls their entire board back to their hand. So everything that they just done doesn't matter. So singular will is another card. So like every single counter that I can think of to Eddy that is good was rotated out of Standard. So of course Eddy will be the best card in the game when there are no counters. Other things that I think are okay, that are, decent, like not the best thing in the world, but just okay, it would be Lurk. You can, if you're more like, you don't, if all that what I just said sounds too complicated for you, Lurk is okay into Eddy. If you just like high roll 1 drop, Snapped on 2, and then Lurk stuff on 3, because your stuff is so big, and it costs so little mana, your Sharkling will trade with the Shyvana, because it's a big card. They'll be big. So you can like high roll Lurk. So high roll decks are a thing that you can do, that would be very, very good. So again, there are so many examples of decks that I think, TF gold card. You bring TF back and you bring back TF gold card and you just rotate in TF. Instantly, it doesn't matter anymore. Because you play Temple with TF, you turbo the TF, and then you gold card every single turn, and then nothing big in the opponent's deck gets to attack anymore. So obviously TF gold card would be one of the other counters in the game that is more like synergy focused and champ based. So these are the things that are good into Eddy, and none of them are Standard legal. But there are so many, and again, I could make this video like an hour long just talking about every single Eddy counter that has been rotated out of the game. Again, for Standard players, again, Eternal Ladder is very much alive and well, and it is a thing, but I'm just talking about like having Standard players be sane and enjoy their play experience, and not have to like play weird brews to get by, and suboptimal burn lists and things like that. Like, just assuming you want to play the game normally, and have a good experience, a lot of these things will have to get rotated back in to help deal with Eddy. If you have any other suggestions in terms of strong Eddy counters that you think are good, make sure to put them in the comments. I have to check to see if... okay, so Jin's still in, but is Annie still in? So, like, if Annie Jin is gone, there goes one of your big core Standard decks. No, Annie Jin's still there. So you can play Annie Jin, but again, you can't play Annie Jin with Decimate and have enough burn to go over the head of the Eddy player. So that could be problematic. But you could try revitalizing Annie Jin, because it seems still seems Standard legal as far as I can tell. But again, without Decimate, it's going to be much weaker. So yeah, this is Eternal King signing out. If you have any other ideas for good Eddy counters, leave them in the comments. But you are, it's tough. It's tough. Standard is basically not a balanced format because all of these things were removed. Oh, I forgot about my favorite. Removal. Like, obviously, I talk a lot about, like, board wipes. I talked a lot about burn and Nexus interaction. I talked a lot about, like, combo rallying and just, like, combo-based win cons. I talk a lot about Vandal Tree being a landmark that, wins you the game. So again, they could rotate back in Vandal Tree, so like alternate win cons. They counter Eddy. So they just like rotate back in Vandal Tree, and then the Eddy player's Nexus explodes when this pops off. And then of course Disintegrate. Any sort of like cheap removal, right? So I could say Crumble. Crumble and Shadow Isles is a pretty good card for countering Eddy. And it's just like not Standard legal, so you don't get a cheap 4-mana removal option for big stuff in Shadow Isles, so that's pretty well missed. And then Disintegrate as well. Yeah, Disintegrate as well. Very well missed card in Standard, essentially being a very cheap removal tool for go big decks. So every single go big counter that I can think of essentially doesn't exist in standard right now. So of course the biggest deck wins. It is a linear equation that will never change in standard as long as the card pool remains as it is. Although you will have players like Sunny trying to find the most creative workaround they can. And, you know, kudos to them for trying it, because again, it's slim pickings. It's slim pickings for Eddy counters right now. But in Eternal, you've got everything. Everything counters Eddy in Eternal. There's so many things that counter Eddy. This is Eternal King, signing out.